After 20 years of war, the Taliban have swept to victory in Afghanistan. The group completed their shockingly rapid advance across the country by capturing Kabul last August. The move came after occupation forces withdrew. Our correspondent Danial Khan traveled deep inside the country to find out how people there look at their future under the Taliban rule and what they feel about the sudden exit of the foreign forces.
عشق من بشکن بزن بشکن دری میخانه را 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 پر بکن با خنده هایت ساغر و میخانه را پر بکن با خنده هایت ساغر و پیمانه را
نام است سجاد تخصص مستر حسنی خود محصل هستم.
Name is Sajjad Hussaini. I study at Mazar-e-Sharif University. I am a passionate musician. I want to become a world-level musician. I want to buy more musical instruments, but I cannot afford them. As a child, I grew up listening to stories. I heard many bad things from the people about the Taliban, that they would cut the hands of the artists and kill the musicians.
بالنسبة که اقتصادی کافی ندارم خودم نمیتونم که مثلا
19-year-old Sajjad Hussaini belongs to the minority Hazara community. The Hazara have historically been some of the poorest and most marginalized people in Afghanistan. They have traditionally lived in the rough mountainous terrain in the central highlands of Afghanistan, an area where they historically sought shelter from Pashtun tribesmen who disapproved of their adherence to the Shiite sect of Islam. When the Taliban took control of Afghanistan, I fled to this area, and now my life is very hard because the winter is here and I have nothing for the winter. I cannot heat up my house. There is nothing to eat. There is a growing food shortage. We have to face a lot of difficulties in this village. The Taliban first emerged during the civil war that followed the withdrawal of Soviet troops in 1989. By 1998, they had taken control of almost all of the country. They enforced their own hardline version of Sharia or Islamic law and introduced brutal punishments. Men were made to grow beards and women had to wear the all-covering burqa. TV, music and cinema were banned. In 2001, the US responded to the 9/11 attacks as officials identified Al-Qaeda and its leader Osama bin Laden as responsible. Bin Laden was in Afghanistan under the protection of the Taliban, the Islamists who had been in power since 1996. When they refused to hand him over, the US intervened militarily, removing the Taliban, promising to support democracy and eliminate any terrorist threat. But perhaps America did not realize that the conflict would become its longest war. NATO allies joined the US and a new Afghan government took over in 2004, but Taliban attacks continued. In 2009, President Barack Obama sent reinforcements to push back the Taliban, but the strategy would not last for long. The Taliban slipped away and later regrouped. During that time, Afghanistan saw tens of thousands of people massacred as the US and international forces intensified operations. According to research by Brown University, the CIA had armed militia groups to fight the Taliban, and these militias were responsible for serious human rights abuses, including extrajudicial killings of civilians. They detained common Afghans without vindication. Families were torn apart, and so was the country, in the name of so-called war on terror. Maulvi Mahmood Shah Agha became a victim of USA's brutality. In 2010, the US forces conducted a raid at my house. My two brothers and a cousin were martyred in the attack. That was the time I took up arms against the foreign occupation. They can never be our friends. They have committed grave atrocities and cruelty against Muslims. They have destroyed many homes. Because of them, many women were widowed. I felt that there was no point in sitting at home and doing nothing against their brutalities. So I took up arms against these beasts. In 2014, at the end of what was the bloodiest year since 2001, NATO's international forces ended their combat mission, leaving responsibility for security to the Afghan army. That gave the Taliban an opportunity, and they seized more territory. We have defeated the occupation forces with very limited resources. As you can see behind me, even these weapons were captured from the Americans. Neither did we have weapons, nor did we have bullets. The world never accepted us, neither are they accepting us now. We used to make IED bombs with tin buckets to blow up NATO forces' tanks. With these limited resources, we defeated the American and occupation forces. Hundreds of people with a similar story as Shah Agha's joined the Taliban movement against foreign occupation, as millions were being displaced as a result of the US-led war. According to the UN, Afghanistan has the third largest displaced population in the world. Since 2012, some 5 million people have fled and not been able to return home, either displaced within Afghanistan or taking refuge in neighboring countries. After over 40 years of war, revenge and violence, Afghanistan once again stands at a critical juncture. Since the Soviet invasion in 1979, one order has collapsed and another has stood up. What has followed each of those times has been a fall into revenge, score settling, and eventually another cycle of disorder and war. It is now up to the Taliban to decide whether they will maintain the cycle of revenge as they did upon seizing power in 1996, or will they truly hold the new path that their leaders have promised in recent days, one of acceptance and reconciliation. Since taking control of the country on August 15th, Taliban forces have pledged not to allow Afghanistan to become a base for terrorists. By the will of Allah, we will provide security to the people and make it even better. The Taliban had declared an amnesty across Afghanistan and said it wanted women to join its government. And contrary to some Western media reports, educational institutions have reopened and young girls have returned to school. Educational institutions are open in many provinces from grade 1 to grade 6, while in Mazar, Balkh and Kandahar the education system is formally open till grade 12. While in the rest of the provinces, our plan needs to be implemented because there are some problems in these provinces. We are working on a major plan and mechanism for the education of women, and as soon as it's ready, the education system will formally begin. As the situation stands, a humanitarian crisis is brewing in the country. It is in need of international help and assistance without any sort of preconditions. Time is running out fast for the Afghans. The 40 million lives depend on the world's response, and there is no doubt that the situation is exacerbating by the day. Harsh winter has begun, and food has already started to run out. And many I met in the country feel they are living in the world's largest prison, as the US, following the disgracing defeat, froze the country's assets amounting to over $10 billion and put up sanctions against the aid-dependent country. Women, children, and the elderly are facing acute malnutrition. The healthcare system is in shambles. According to some surveys, the US spending on the conflict stands at over $1 trillion on sophisticated weapons and fancy firepower, The US left Afghanistan's Bagram airfield, the largest military base, by shutting off the electricity and slipping away in the night without even notifying the base's new Afghan commanders. And in his address to the world, President Joe Biden had said it's the right and the responsibility of the Afghan people alone to decide their future.
The United States did what we went to do in Afghanistan, to get the terrorists who attacked us on 9/11 and deliver justice to Osama bin Laden, and to degrade the terrorist threat to keep Afghanistan from becoming a base from which attacks could be continued against the United States. We achieved those objectives. That's why we went. We did not go to Afghanistan to nation build. And it's the right and the responsibility of the Afghan people alone to decide their future and how they want to run their country.
With the Taliban coming to power for a second time, they have promised a new era of peace in Afghanistan with absolute pardon for those they have been battling for 2 decades and a return to normal life. Sajjad hopes the Taliban have changed. The foreign countries that invaded Afghanistan abandoned us in this situation. This is an intolerable situation for me and the people of Afghanistan. We have no words for them. We just expect the new government to help us, both financially and spiritually, and the new government should come here and distribute food to the people and help them survive. Moving forward is going to be an uphill task for the newly formed government of the Taliban. They may have changed, but the world remains skeptical about recognizing them. It remains to be seen whether the Taliban delivers on its promises or rolls back 2 decades of gains made by the common man of the country. But for now, nothing remains more important than providing the people with food, shelter, and humanitarian assistance. Danial Khan, CGTN, Kandahar, Afghanistan.